month, we try to cover the basics of how to get started with one of the services in SAP Cloud Platform. And for those of you that did not join in the past couple of sessions, the idea this year is we're trying to build out over the course of about 10 sessions an end-to-end incident management application, which means the UI, the integration, the mobile aspect, the back end, the HANA pieces, everything from start to finish. And so today, the focus is how do we get an operational reporting type dashboard out of the data that we were storing in the last couple of sessions. And so that's the goal, is to focus today on how to do that. And the topic specifically is Fiori elements, floor plans for OData version 4. And so without further ado, let's push out our speakers, let you know who I have with me today. So I've got two folks. We're going to do a little bit of a different run through. So we've got Christian Kobolski with us as a development architect from SAP. Say hi, Christian, and how long have you been working for SAP?
Hi, Scott. So I've been working for SAP now since 2001 and started as a developer back then in procurement, had a couple of stations in supply chain management in by design, and now am involved in the Fiori elements OData v4 stack in the area of SAP user experience engineering.
Awesome, awesome. And so Christian is going to be helping me build out the Fiori Elements project in the second half of our presentation here. And then also we have Hansi is with us. Hansi, what do you do for SAP?
Yeah, so my name is Hans-Jürgen Richtein, or for short, Hansi. I'm Chief Development Architect in the same area like Christian. I'm actually responsible for finally delivering the Fiori Elements floor plans for OData v4 technology.
This is amazing. And so a couple of things before we get started, just to kind of set the tone. So number one, two things are at play here. One, in all of the previous sessions up until today, I've showed everybody and I've worked with the co-presenters to show you something that you could try immediately following the session, and even sometimes people follow along during the session. Today's a little bit different. We made a decision amongst the three of us here that we would show you what is planned to be released by SAP this year. I can't give you an exact date because that would get me in trouble, but there is a plan in place to release it this year. It's in planning. So today you won't be able to leave the session and download it, but we're hoping that we're going to give you some really good insight into what you can expect hopefully this year. And so that's number one. And number two, just a quick note, it's interesting times, and I just want to hope that, I want to say that I hope on behalf of SAP, everybody's staying safe, and there's no better way to do that than to isolate yourself like I am here in my office by myself and take part in some virtual learning. So thank you everyone that decided to join. And so without further ado, let's get into our first poll question, which we just ask you all the time, just to kind of get a feeling for if you've had any exposure to Fiori elements in the past. And that gives Hansi and Christian and I just a little bit of insight to know if you've heard of it, if you have any idea what it is, just to kind of give us some context as we get in there. So we've got quite a lot of people joined in live today, so thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to give it 10 more seconds. I'm going to pop over to the results side. We've got about 20% of the people that I've answered so far. Come on, people, hit the button. Just to say you're familiar or not familiar. We'll pop over to this screen. So you can see Hansi and Christian, we've got about a 60-40 split between people that are familiar with it. Now that's not to say that people have built out a Fiori elements, an application using Fiori elements, but still people are familiar with the term, which is a great thing, and we're going to get into lots of details today. And the other last thing I'll say before I hand it over to my colleague here to go through the presentation is that if anybody's been watching as well, one of the things that I'm excuse me, trying to illustrate through this series is that SAP Cloud Platform, yes, there's a unique value proposition. It's clear when doing extensions against SAP, but you will see today that I'm using Fiori Elements, we'll be using Fiori Elements to surface some data in a custom app that I built that has nothing to do with SAP. So I'm always trying to illustrate the non-SAP because everybody assumes it works with SAP, which is very true. So without further ado, Hansi, over to you. Walk us through the strategy around Fiori Elements, where it fits in the landscape, and let's tell people what they should know.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So, as you know, SAP Fiori is around for 7 years now. So we started that in 2013. And over the years, the UX guidelines evolved quite a lot. So new functionality was introduced, new UX paradigms and patterns were introduced. And yeah, a lot of things changed over time, not the theme alone, but also when it comes to how you use Fiori at all. So if you create an application, your own application along Fiori guidelines, you of course want to adhere to the existing guidelines at a certain point in time, but you also want that over the life cycle of your application, this still is true after some years. So you want your application to stay on top of the Fiori UX guidelines, which would mean you have to touch it like every year. You have to always look into the guidelines, check every year if your app is deviating, and then change it. Here's actually where Fiori Elements comes to your rescue. If you create an application with Fiori Elements, then you will just focus on the backend, on your business logic, so the data structures that you take care for, and you will just provide additional information on the data. Fiori Elements will then create the application for you on top of that information, and it will not require any UI development from your side in the first place. This will also mean it will automatically cover the Fiori guidelines as they are at that point in time. And over time, it will also adjust your application along the changing guidelines from SAP Fiori, which of course means for your whole enterprise, once you roll out your application, all your applications will be consistent among each other. So your users get a consistent user experience throughout your whole application suite that you're using. And you will benefit from all the best practices that Fiori will bring to your applications. So here you see two typical patterns of applications. So Fiori Elements is floor plan based. So we will provide specific floor plans that will fit most of the application needs that you will encounter. So here in this case, for example, we have the typical data list. So you will present a number of objects or items in the data list. On top of that, you will have the option of filtering that list. You will be able to sort, of course, along the columns that you're interested in. You will have certain actions that can be applied to the objects. You can choose what kind of columns you want to see or not see. You, of course, have a search through that data. And you can, once you define your favorite pattern here, you can save that as a so-called variant. So once you click on one of those items, you would get the object details of that very object, which is also a standardized view that will allow you to also edit the data with the so-called draft management, which means even over time you can change the data, and only once you're satisfied with the final result, you would save it or commit it to the database.
So Hansi, so on this screen, just the notion of a floor plan, which you've been educating me on in the past week, just to use some active listening here, there is an expectation and a design by SAP that says, you know what, for these selection fields, we're going to put those across the top. For the data in the table, that's going to go below the selection fields. And then we click a row in that table, it opens up more details about that row. And so all of these things are there. And then the idea behind that previous screen and whatnot is to provide a configuration mechanism via an annotation that would activate these sections and make it really super easy for people to visualize the data should the floor plan, which is the word you've been using, be applicable to their use case, right? So as soon as someone says, hey, in their organization, I need a list report, it should be an absolute no-brainer where people think to themselves, okay, SAP has a list report, and all I have to do is create these annotations, which we're going to show people shortly, how to put those in there and get something that looks like this, which is an enterprise-grade list report with all the features and all the functions that you would need.
Exactly. So the one thing that you need to deliver is obviously the data itself, and then you describe the data, as you said, with the so-called annotations, which give additional hints to the Fiori elements renderer, how to present that in a certain manner. So that's what we will see on the next screen. So maybe one comment here, the most complicated stuff usually when you do these kind of applications on your own is to take care of all the navigation options that you would have. So back and forth, not only within the application, but also from application to application and that kind of stuff. And this is all be taken care of centrally by the Fiori Elements technology. So nothing you need to have to take care of on your own. This will work consistently throughout all your applications. So in general, if you look at the floor plans that you usually need, a lot of that is being covered by Fiori Elements, and that can range from simple applications that are just simple lists, maybe with some object information to be edited, over to more complicated applications that include charts that have multiple views and so forth. At a certain point, of course, there's like a step where you would go into so-called extension development, so where you could extend that by your own application parts that you would include into the existing Fiori Elements client. This is here on the right-hand side, which would increase the complexity a bit in the beginning and a lot if you want to create very complex applications. So it's not a silver bullet for all potential applications that you could look for. So freestyle development has still its place for some applications. So once you assess what you want to do, you should decide whether in the end a freestyle development would be the way to go, or whether Fiori Elements would bring you to the point where you want to end up. So the annotations are actually important to describe better what the semantics of the data is that you provide. For example, an email address in the first place is just a string. If you want the Fiori renderer to make that a link to your email application so that once you tap on it, it will open the email application, you have to tell this data is an email address. Or if you, for example, have two data information, one is a price and the other is a currency. These are two separate things for the client in the first place, but you can tell it these belong together. So the price has always to go with the currency to make sense of it. The same holds true for certain information within the details. Yeah, so like in this picture here, the model version alone doesn't make any sense. So, but all three together, so the product name, the model version, and the brand, they three together make totally sense, and they should always appear together. So you can tell the Fiori client already that these separate information always belong together for a user to make sense. And then, of course, whether or not something is editable. So in this case, you say this object can be edited, and at that point, we would present an edit button and, of course, the according functionality to edit stuff. So these annotations, they look like this. So annotations are kind of a standard, there's a standard list of annotations that you can use. So for example, here we have the line item annotation. You could look that up. And then you say, okay, we have a table that has like, I don't know, 20 columns. But of course, in the first place, not all 20 columns are relevant for the user. So in this case, we just want to see the category, the priority, the incident status, and the title. And that you just define together with your data, and then the Fiori Elements client will read the data and will say, okay, so I just show these 4 columns in the first place. Of course, later on, through personalization, you could change that, like remove a column or add more columns of the available data. But this is how you define how it would look like in the first place.
Right, and so just to comment on that, so for me, like this is one of the most important slides that we have in the deck, and for people that are on the phone, we always share the deck, and on your screen, you should see an additional resources pod where you can click and also download the deck from there. But one of the things that I was really confused about when I started working with Hansi and Christian is, what is this vocabulary that you're talking about? Like, we're typing things in, and I didn't really quite understand it, but in fact, there is a documented site with all the different types of annotations you can include, which is why we've got a link in the deck to the UI vocabulary. You can go there and check it out. But this line item is one of the main ones. It basically says, hey, activate and put these columns onto the table. And it's no more complicated than that. So if you've got an OData service, you're telling which fields show up on the table, and voila, the rest is magic. So it's pretty impressive. Anyway, keep going now, Hansi.
Yeah, exactly. So this headline up here, the UI vocabulary headline, is actually a link. So when you open the slide deck on your own and walk through it, you can just click the headline UI vocabulary on top here. Okay, so and this is probably very interesting for you, because what does it mean then, bottom line, for you? Yeah, so it's very easy to develop a SAP Fiori Elements application, because the data you have already, so you just provide some additional information on the data, and then the Fiori Elements client will already figure out how an application would look like that can operate on that data. If you do freestyle development, you start from scratch. You have to think about everything, like which controls to use, how to adhere to Fiori guidelines, and so forth. So that's quite tedious and a lot of work. Flexibility, of course, nothing beats freestyle development. There's no way around that. That's the most flexible way, because you can do what you want, but attention, you can also do what people may not want. So you can deviate from UX guidelines. Of course, you have less flexibility with Fiori Elements, because we always have the Fiori guidelines as a guardrail here. But overall, and that's the most important bottom line here, is costs. So the costs are very low for developing a Fiori Elements application compared to a freestyle application, which is much more expensive, especially on the long haul. If you look down the road, over the years, you have to adapt it to changing guidelines.
So Hansi, the good news is it's consistent. The bad news is it's consistent. Right? So
Right.
That's it. All right, keep going. It's going. You're doing great.
Okay, so you have actually two ways of developing such an application. So what Scott and Christian will show you in a minute is doing a local development using Visual Studio Code. So you can download all the required plugins from the Microsoft Marketplace. They are available. And the other option would be using the upcoming SAP Business Application Studio. There you would find a completely pre-configured environment that you can just start, and it's up and running and can go right away. So that being said, three things you should take away here or remember. So the first thing is SAP Fiori Elements will drastically accelerate your development, while at the same time always making sure that you have a UX consistency across all your applications, and always adhering to the SAP Fiori guidelines. And with Fiori Elements, you can actually cover the lion's share of all the applications you would ever need. So probably like 80%. For all the other cases, there's still the Fiori development possible in a freestyle manner with SAP UI5. So with that, I hand over to Scott and Christian to actually show you how that all works.
That's awesome. Well done, Hansi. Thank you for that great introduction.
Thanks, Hansi.
And so, yeah, that's great. So now we're going to switch gears, as we always do. Did everybody get that? Switch gears, garage, mechanic. We're going to switch gears into the next portion where we're going to build something. And so just to recap what we had, anybody pick up on that playing words, recap? So in the previous session, we showed people how to create a CAP project that would expose the services for this particular project. So now if I share my screen, I want to tell everybody what I have in place and why that's relevant. So what we've done for today, you will see on my screen, I'm going to be using the Visual Studio with some plugins, with some extensions that you have not been, they're not available to you yet. But the idea is they would be available here, and the same plugins would make their way into the Business Application Studio. So what we're showing you, very applicable it's likely it'll be almost exactly the same when it gets released. So just, we don't have time to go through the entire structure of the project, but if you want to see what that is, you go back to last month's garage session and the one before, and it explains how it is we created this CAP project. So what we've done for today, we have everything deployed locally on my machine, and that's what we're going to use. So that's the starting point. What the starting point is the previous CAP project that we delivered. And my goal between now and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is to build out this incident reporting mechanism, dashboard, visualized within the next 40 minutes. That's what I need. And so when we started working with these gentlemen, I had no idea, and I think you're going to be pretty impressed with what you're about to see. So question then, Christian, over to you. Where's the magic? Yes. Where do I start? That's the question.
Yes, so again, as first, thanks for having us today, Scott. We're really excited to have it go now with a lab preview of these Fiori element tools. Yeah, we have installed as Fiori extensions in the VS Code, and people who are familiar with developing a CAP or data service love the development experience, and that's in VS Code, and that is actually what Fiori tools are leveraging here. So as a starting point, we will create now the application by making usage of the app generator, which is a Fiori tool plugin, and you can trigger it by clicking the context, by opening the context menu in the Explorer. And then you have two options, and from below, and you choose the application generator. That's the one.
Sweet. Seems like a reasonable place to click, Christian.
Yes. You could also trigger the command palette in VS Code and have it. Since we are running a CAP or data v4 service, let's go for the list report object page for Fiori Elements v4 template. All right. So in here, in this second step, since we have a CAP project, we have this flavor of doing the development, of making usage of it, yes. And now you just have to define the folder where your CAP project is located, and the app generator should then automatically identify the service that is inside. And here we are. So this is
so I can see there's a 1 in the drop-down that tells me there's a service that I could use. And there's only one, and that's the same service that people would have seen us build in the previous garage session. So even though you don't need to go back and watch it, if you want to have the complete end-to-end experience, you'll see where that comes from. But nonetheless, it's an OData v4 service that we're selecting here.
Exactly. And we are configuring now the list report object page floor plan. And as a main entity to be shown on list report, we are choosing safety incidents as the leading entity. The navigation entity will leave to none, since the object page where the list report navigates to will show single instances of the safety incidents entities. Okay. So you just can click next. So here for the generation part, we have to give some additional information. So the module name, choose incidents, good, yeah. Just give it a title and a namespace. Nice one. And some description as you like. Below we see the generation target, and it's already pre-selected. Target is the app folder within the project. So you can just click generate application now. All right. We see now the console open below, that we can see what is happening, and voila, we're done. That's it. So the app had been generated.
Okay, cool. So what happened as a result of doing that? Like, I noticed that there's some new stuff now in this app folder that wasn't there before.
Right. So at first, maybe let's have a look at the package JSON file before we dive into the incident. So from the existing project in the package JSON, there's one entry that had been added to the end, and that is from the Fiori tools. which is an indicator and pointing to the target where the app lives. And this is enabling the Fiori tools, which will guide us now through the whole development cycle of this app. Now let's have a look at the app folder, what had been generated in there. We see, taken from the module name, the folder incidents. And inside it, we have a small folder that's called SRC, and inside there lives the artifacts that are used by the Fiori tools. And below, the well-known folders and artifacts of the Fiori application. So the web app, here's the app.json. Yeah, that is actually the configuration of the list report and the object page in a JSON-like format that is used by the Fiori tools. This is also reflected in the manifest JSON, and they keep in sync, actually.
Okay.
In the web app folder, yes. So there we can see the component.js, the index.html that is being used for local testing, and a manifest containing the app descriptor configuration. For example, also the routing between the pages of the app. And there's an additional file, as you can see below the manifest JSON, that's called Annotation CDS, and that's going to play an important role in the course of this show.
Yeah, it doesn't look very impressive right now.
Yes, not yet,
empty.
but it'll evolve. Yes, you can see. So there's a using directive. We have a using directive to the incident service that lives in the shown folder here, and it is given an alias service, and we will use the alias in order to add annotations to the UI, to the configuration, so that we can describe the user interface that is to be shown. But maybe now at first, before doing so, let's just start the CAP service and see what is already there.
So for the folks that were, again, not on the call, on the last Garage session, feel free to go back again and watch it. But one of the things we discussed is the CDS watch command, which basically just runs the project, starts the project locally, and when it's finished, it's going to be watching for changes consistently without me having to go restart it. And then you'll see it's prompting me with this link to run on localhost. So I will just click that, and then immediately I see a rendering of what's available. And now we have this new link that wasn't in the application that we generated last time when we worked with you in the Garage series, but we now have this one. So if I click it, it should render now the Fiori page, and I have a new tile called My Incidents, which should contain a new quote-unquote application built using Fiori elements. And now, but it's empty. What's going on here, Christian?
Yes, it is. It's as expected. So we see the list report page, but since we didn't yet add any annotations describing its content, it is displayed empty. But we are going to change that now.
Excellent.
So for that, we have
good.
Yes. Yeah. So let's go back to the annotation CDS file.
Yep.
And the first thing we want to do now is to define the columns to be shown in the list report table. And for that, we're making usage of the UI vocabulary that was also mentioned by Hansi. And in order to define the target where these annotations are to be applied, at first we add the line annotate. So if you type in annotate, and the LSP support already gives you a proposal, and now you replace foo with the alias that is defined in the first line. Service, and we want to add annotations to the main leading entity for the list report, which would be safety incidents. So this is
so
annotate service safety incidents.
Right, because it's prompting me with a list of all the entities that are exposed in the OData service, right?
Right. So this is the LSP support, which is currently only a lab preview since we're still working on that. But you can already see the experience for the developer here. So now, after the with, we have to define what we want to add, which kind of annotations we plan to add. And we are adding UI, the annotations from the UI vocabulary. And in CAP CDS, the starting point for all annotations is the add. Yes, exactly. And you just select the first proposal, and you get this now. Now maybe some empty lines so that we can see more clearly. So it is add UI, then we have some curly brackets, and the starting point now is inside the curly brackets. So you should get it proposed. Great. Just hit return. Now you tap inside the brackets. Now we define a collection of data fields which reflect the columns to be shown on the list report. So just give the LSP support and choose UI data field, which is another annotation term from the same vocabulary set, which is now replaced with this, and the value is pointing to property of our main entity. So let's have a look what the LSP support offers here. So maybe let's start typing, for example, category code. It's always good to have some codes. That's good. Now let's add in substantial data fields. And you know your entity set by heart, so you just add them now, the ones you like to see.
So I can just hit the code completion, title. Type a D. I'm just hitting the D on the keyboard. It brings up data field. And then we've got, I think, another one that's incident status, if I'm not mistaken. And then I think we want to do one more, which is the most important one for me, is to be able to sort the incidents that are being created by priority, which is really the most important one. So I'm going to put a D, I invoke the field support, and I get that data field, and I'm going to put in PR and hit the space bar. Priority code. And so just to explain what I heard back, is when I started this with you a couple of weeks ago, this whole annotation thing was very, I would say, murky for me. And so when I see this right here with the with at UI, the way that I think of this, right or wrong, is that that's kind of like a category for me that's going to prompt me now within the UI category what annotations are available, and that line item, which is the one that Hansi showed in the PowerPoint, this is describing one line in that table, and now we're basically specifying which fields will be available in that table.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
And there are also a couple of other vocabularies. So we're now making usage of UI, but we also have core or common vocabulary where you can define text for codes or text arrangements, or also a whole set for doing analytics, actually. But now let's maybe have a look. What is the effect? So if you had a look below, so the terminal was showing updates all the time since CDS compiler took all the added annotations and poured them into EDMX, which is exposed within the metadata of the OData v4 service. And by refreshing, you see the effect, yes.
This is great. So essentially, I've got what I need for my app. Christian, we can call it a day, or can you offer me more?
Sure. So you could even immediately interact. So if you open above the small arrow, there you will get a search field. And if you now type in, for example, a title or a status,
that's pretty cool.
Then you see this is already working. It's already in place.
Wow. So really, we're like 10 minutes in. We got the data displayed that I want. I can sort it. I can search it. That's pretty good. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's
pretty cool.
That's
but
not.
I noticed,
let's continue, right?
Yeah, but I noticed that typically there's some other. I've seen some of the other Fiori elements that are available that I've seen inside of S4 where they have these nice selection fields where I could sort by or maybe make my variant by priority as an example. So let's take a shot at that. I'm
glad that you're asking. Yeah, so that's what we are going to do next. And cat comes in handy since they already generate a couple of annotations for us. So for all the codes that we have in the entity, the CDS compiler already offers in the metadata automatically the value list and annotations. So the only thing we have to do now is to add a selection field annotation where we make usage of the properties to be shown as in the filter bar. So you just go to the next line by pressing return and type in selection field, bring up again the LSP support selection fields. Now we have a collection here again, and just add now all the codes from above. So category code, incident status code, and priority code. Just separated by comma, yes. It's
okay.
Immediately compiling, and now you can, after saving, just refresh the browser to see the effect.
All right, let's see if it's that easy. Because it wouldn't be that easy if I was building it, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's the strength. We are configuring the UI.
Yeah, no coding, configuring.
No need to add to implement something.
What's going on here? It's giving me some trouble. Okay, here we go. Voila, we have some selection fields. Very cool. I want to see my hardware. Very nice. So already I've got some selection fields that I can filter on. I've still got my display at the bottom. Very, very nice. Love it.
Yes.
I love it. That's so easy. Nobody should be building this report from scratch, like really.
No, absolutely not. You could even use type ahead within the selection field, which is even more handy, or just open the F4 help by clicking the button.
Oh, yeah,
so as you see. Yeah.
Oh, I see. It's pretty cool. Very nice, very nice. But now I have to tell you, I'm a bit of a visual guy. So I like that when things are coming up in a chart and a table and stuff like that. So it'd be really awesome if somehow I could get something that appealed to my sense about visual. And I know I'd asked you about this before we started the session a couple of weeks ago. And you said, oh, we should probably be able to do something there. So let's, what do you think?
Yeah, sure. So we can make usage of a lab preview of a feature that is coming in an upcoming release, and this is the interactive chart. So the interactive chart then can act as a intermediate filter between the filter bar and the table. And we will add this now by making usage of another Fiori tool, since there are two options basically in how to add annotations to a CAD project. So the first part that we had seen now is rather for the experts. So they are making usage of the LSP support, but for the newbie developer, in order to give him a kickstart, we can make usage of the Fiori guided development.
And that would be me. This
chart.
is totally me,
Mm-hmm.
just for the record. This is totally me. So yeah, let's try that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So right, so it's the last option here. Yes. So you just click
this
that
is my
one.
favorite part.
Okay.
I love the guided development.
So we have here a collection of guided developments, and there's an option for chart and for list report. As you see below, add an interactive chart to a list report page. So expanding that, you get it first a description of what is happening if you use that.
Yeah, now, Christian, when I first saw this, I made the comment to you that this is great, and it's having documentation is great, but you said, hold on a second, it's more than documentation, because it looks like documentation as far as this, right? But it's more than that.
No, it's guided development. So there's an interactive part besides of the description. So below you see the steps to accomplish in order to have this chart added to the list report. So let's give it a try. So the first thing, we need to define the target where the annotation has to be added in. That would be, again, our annotation CDS. Yes.
Okay.
And now the service and the entity to be annotated, of course, they need also to be defined. So it's again the leading main entity. Now it's about charts. So chart is always measures in dimensions. So as a dimension, I propose we go for category code. So to have a grouping by categories. And the measure, which is the aggregatable property. So there's one defined in the core annotations, which is in account distinct aggregation property. So let's just choose that. Now you could toggle between chart types and so, and below you see the preview of the code snippet. And by pressing apply, you can just add it. So click and you see it's already there.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So visual chart, I walk through the guided development, I fill out the properties, it's able to see again my service, I fill out the properties, I hit apply, it updates my annotation file, which is obviously being reflected down here. And so I should be able to go back, and if what you're telling me is true, I should be able to see this chart.
Let's give it a try. Just refresh the browser.
All right, let's see. Let's see. I was having a trouble refreshing the same screen today. What's going on? I probably should have cleared up my browser before I started. All right, so very impressive. So I have my legend on the right-hand side, which is clearly coming from that list of categories. I can click it here. I can click it here, and it's interacting, hence the name interactive chart. It's interacting with the grid of data I have on the bottom, and I can combine the two. That's really cool.
Exactly, yeah. That's the interactive chart. It also interacts if you use the filter bar above, it should also adjust accordingly. So categories maybe not. Of course, now you see only a single bar, but we see that this basically works. Adding more of them, it should also adjust appropriately.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Like really, I've already got everything I need here from the incident management app. It's more than enough, but there's more.
There's more, right?
Yeah,
so there's another great tool.
Yeah, because I can see here, like there's number one, I can recognize from having done a little bit of UI5 development that the typical table control has this arrow when it's clickable, i.e. show me some more data, what's behind this particular row. But again, we have an empty page, which is not that impressive.
Exactly. So that is the same starting point now as we had with the list report. So we have the navigation to the empty object page in place, but now we need to define the annotations in order to define the content to be shown. And since we have already seen how LSP support annotation adding is supporting the developer and the guided help, in order to speed up a bit, there are a couple of prepared snippets that we can use in order to add the annotations. And let's just add them step by step, refresh the browser, and then explain what is happening. Yeah, so let's just start with first.
Okay, good idea. I like this, put the code in and show what happens, put the code in, show what happens. I think it makes it very readable. So let's get over here. Gonna go back, drill in. And then voila, I see some data. So already I see the screen populated based on this new annotation that I just added in here. So walk us through what's going on here, Christian.
Yeah. So we now see here 3 blocks. basically that have been added. So the first one is the header info block, which is defining at first the label for the type of the entity set that is being used. So the type name plural is actually the label that is used on the list report header. So that is, the type name is used on the object page. Basically, it should be called incident here, and the plural should be incidents, but that's only a small glitch. And in a real development example, we would make usage of IM18N property files in order to have all these labels localized. Right. There's another property in the header information, which is the type image URL. So that one is now referring to an icon that we can see in the browser. We could also have added a URL to an image to be shown here. And the last one, the title, is pointing to property of our entity set. And that is the one that is shown on top of the table, which is currently password problems. So that is the first block. Then we see next to the icon, we see a group of properties. And these are defined in the field groups. So the field group is actually the third block we see here in the annotations. And the field group basically gives an alias, has an alias which is called header general information, which is referenced in the so-called header facets annotation. So facet is a vocabulary term that defines a section on the UI. So, and this is a facet that is to be shown in the header, actually. And it refers to the field group that we define below, which comprises, again, a collection of data fields to be shown.
Gotcha. In terms of this notion of a floor plan, this is referred to as the header. And what we're doing now is we're saying, hey, take these 3, 4, 5 fields and put them into the header, and SAP and the floor plan takes care of where they're going to be rendered. So you don't have to worry about that. Again, you just tell it, hey, I need this data in the header. It's a common floor plan. Put it in there. We're good.
Exactly.
Very
and
nice.
We also see there's also a speciality. So there's a communication context that had already been defined as a core annotation, and we just make usage of it here by targeting it. And you see that now in the field group below, there's a clickable name which will show a contact card on the UI.
Right, gotcha. That's very cool.
Yeah, so
very cool.
Different flavors with data fields and data field for annotations, and there are a couple more. But let's just continue. So below the header, we see still an empty section. So I would propose to add in snippet 2 in order to fill up that. Now there's a whole block that came in. Maybe you could give it some beautification even in the CDS file so that it gets a bit formatted. Yeah, that's better. That looks better.
Oops. Little glitch there. What's going on? Let me just refresh the page.
Murphy is saying hello. Well, let's just see.
Murphy's always with me in these garage sessions. He just sometimes he appears, sometimes he doesn't. But I tell everybody we're working without a net here, so there's nothing fake. There's no videos. There's no painted screenshots. Everything is real. So we get the occasional glitch, but nothing major. Okay, so we've got now another section, which is so the page is filling out quite nicely. In fact, so what's going on here?
So again, this is organized in field groups, and the field groups are referred in so-called facets. So before we were talking about header facets. For the content section, we have another term that is called facets. And this can actually be hierarchically organized. So in the first facet level, we have a collection of facets, which groups together a couple of reference facets which refer themselves again to the field group. So that was a long sentence. I hope it came over clearly.
Yeah, you've got 3 right here, basically. What you're saying is you've got 3 reference facets, and they each contain different details. So as an example, incident details, as an example, right? Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, and below this collection, we have another facet that is the incident process flow, which points as a target to a UI line item annotation. And if we see in the UI, the table is still empty.
Wow.
That is because the line item annotation is not in place yet.
Right, we need this guy. If only we had a snippet that would allow us to bring that in.
Oh, yeah, that would be awesome.
Oh, look at that.
In place. Awesome.
That's cool. Okay, so that's going to be saved down there. Let's give this another shot. See if Murphy has gone away or if he wants to make another appearance. Let's see. Okay, and so just for the people to know, so the idea of the next garage session that we will do is we're going to be showing people how to use workflow to run an incident through different stages. And so we're just highlighting here. So if an incident had many steps or many phases, we could bring that into this Fiori element, which we will do next month after we get through, which is why we mocked some of this up today in terms of the data and the display, because we haven't done the workflow session yet, which is next month, myself and DJ Adams. But the idea is, okay, I want to see statuses related to this incident. So we started with a table, a list of incidents, we drilled into the details, and now the details also have some other details in the form of this table. So that's pretty cool. But, you know, this would be, it's kind of, we got everything on one page here. I'm flipping back and forth. I'm wondering if we could tidy that up a little bit.
Yeah, that's a bit tedious, actually. So maybe we can do something about that. So for that, in order to make this a bit more convenient, we're making usage of another Fiori tool, which is the page map. And you access the page map tool via the small file app.json, which is located in the source folder of the incidents app, clicking the right button and accessing the page map like this.
Got it.
Right.
Got it.
So here, what you see now is a representation of the application's pages and the navigation that is defined in between them. And on top of the page map, you see a tiny small toggle that's called FCL. So if you hover, it says enable flexible column layout. Now that sounds interesting. So yes, just give it a try.
Okay, because it's been busy down below here pushing different things out. So let's have a look and see if it had an effect.
There's a lot happening in the background, but you see the effect immediately if you just refresh the browser.
Wow, okay, so I'm already seeing the impact already. So now what we've done, if I were to take this screen, people have some more real estate to look at, immediately taken the application, activated the flexible column layout, so I can put focus on the big part of the screen, my charts. I can still filter through, as an example. I can pick one row, I can pick two rows, and on the right-hand side, I'm getting the details all on one screen, which is quite nice. And if I want to, I could, of course, bring this back to a full page, shrink it down, get rid of it, whatever I want to do. Very flexible, for sure. Very, it accommodates a lot of different views, should I wish to do that. And of course, it is responsive. If I bring it down, it'll make the decision based on the size of the screen layout. Wow, that's nice. So I'm definitely going to use this for my incident reporting. There's no question. But you know what? This is pretty good. But one last thing. One of the things that I get asked a lot about, Christian, when I'm out there talking to customers, and we've got about 6 or 7 minutes here to wrap it up. But one of the things they say is, it's pretty good, but you know, there are some times, Scott, when the template could use a little bit of tweaking, maybe via a custom module, should we wish to write some, if we have some UI5 resources, and we wanted to maybe make something really pretty, maybe for these statuses as an example. So how does the Fiori Elements framework accommodate that?
Yes, so here comes in something new. So we call it the flexible programming model, and that allows so-called hybrid scenarios to be defined in the future. And the first flavor of it is that we can add in custom pages, which are basically freestyle UI5 pages, in combination to the standard Fiori Elements pages that we have here. So let's have a look at that. And I've prepared something in order to do so. For that, you just go to the test resources folder. So that's the one below, and there's one folder that's called X. And if you just expand it, then we see there are basically two folders inside. Yeah, you copy it, yes, and you paste it into the web app folder of your app.
Okay.
So before continuing, let's just have a look at the artifacts so that we show the audience that this is no mad magic, but this is really UI5. We have an XML view defining a process flow and a corresponding controller that acts as the event handler processor and so on. And now we are going to add that custom page to our existing app. And for that, we are making, again, usage of the page map. So if you just move over to the page map, we see on the object page, there is a small plus icon. And if you click that one, you get a dialog. So here you could now just add another object page as you already have it, or you add a custom page. So let's go for that option.
Okay.
So now, as we know that on our object page, we have a table which shows basically the incident flow data. We use that as the navigation starting point. So let's choose for navigation the entity set incident flow, which is basically the navigation property from the safety incidents.
Okay.
Now, the next is we could now create a completely new view. This would basically create a view controller pair within the X folder, but we are now making usage of the existing view in order to have something nice to show, and it is automatically recognized process flow. So let's just click Add, and voila, there's another page below the object page.
Wow. Okay. But it certainly cannot be that easy. I didn't have to write any code, Christian. I'm kind of disappointed.
It's not that easy. So if you open the process flow view in the controller, you see, of course, there's a lot of tedious XML coding and controller JavaScript code that has to be in place in order to make things work properly, of course.
Of course,
that's what had been prepared for the demo. But for adding it, it is just that easy. And if you would have a look at the app.json and the manifest, you would see that the routing would be enhanced. But now let's just refresh to see the effect.
All right, let's have a look here at the final product in our last 3 minutes, which I think we're right on time, which is amazing. So off the top, right, so the going in scenario was, people have seen us create the backend CAP project. So we did some enterprise messaging. We did a mobile app last month to create the incidents that you're seeing now, but I wanted some way to do reporting without having to invest maybe in some third-party reporting tools. I just want to get my data up on a screen and see what I have in terms of high priority incidents. So we've been able to construct this with some visualization, with this chart, with the grid down below, with the ability to select the columns, sort the columns via the selection fields. And then as we drill into this grid, it will populate.
Maybe you give it another refresh.
Yeah, let's see. Murphy strikes twice. He wanted to say goodbye to me before I left. Hold on. Let's see.
No worries. It should work out.
Yeah, so okay, it's already been selected here. So we now see on the right-hand side this enhanced view or the details for one of the particular rows. And now when I click on one of these process status steps, I see the custom application that's been attached to this grid here. So we have the ability to do a little bit of custom paired with an application generated 100% by Fiori elements. So with that, I'm just going to stop the screen. I will go back to our main page here. I will ask people just quickly, we have a survey for you. If you want to, as you know, we never chase people after these calls are over. That's not something that we do. So if you want to get more details, considering where we are in today's environment, if you want to organize a one-on-one session, get some more details, see how you could use it, fill out the survey, that's great. We do have coming up, just to kind of let you know where we are, in the next session, we'll be talking about workflow and how to take those events and put them through a workflow process using the workflow service inside of SAP Cloud Platform. Then we have another one coming up in May. But before we finish, I want to say a big thank you to the team that I've been working with for the past couple of weeks to get ready. It's been a super amazing learning experience for me, so I'm hoping some of that came through today on the call. But thank you, Hansi, Christian, Marita, and all the team over there that's been helping me. It's been really, really helpful, and I hope everybody got some learning out of it today. Any parting words, Christian or Hansi?
Yeah, so my conclusion would be thanks again for having us and for giving us the opportunity to give a glimpse to the audience what is coming up in the Fiori element stack.
That's great. Thanks very much, Christian. And Hansi?
From my side here, that was also a great experience beforehand when we did the rehearsals and stuff. So we also learned a lot from you, Scott.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, well, listen, I'm going to wrap it up there. We're 2 minutes over, and I try to keep these things at a tight ship. And so everybody have a great day, and thanks for joining. We'll see you soon in the garage. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, so right to the minute, gentlemen, right to the minute. That was almost perfect, except for Murphy showed his head once or twice, but really it was really well orchestrated.